I love Pokemon. I always have. And I always will. Not just the game, but the characters themselves. When I was about 6, my dad brought me my first ever games console, a yellow Game Boy Color, with a copy of Pokemon Yellow. I was overjoyed. I'd been a hardcore Pokemon fan ever since I started watching the TV shows with my brother and some friends, and every time I would start trying to reenact some Pokemon, due to my young age and naive nature, I didn't know it was just a kids show and a game. My brother was with me, and his own colourless Game Boy, the see-through one that shows all of the machinery inside, had a copy of Pokemon Blue. I would have gotten Red, but they were out of stock. My brother began his game, along with me, in the car on the way to my grandmother's house. We were both instantly hooked. I fell in love with Pikachu instantly, and my mind being naive at a young age made me call it a weird name. Thinking of a girl I knew who had recently moved, a very close friend of ours, I named my Pikachu Jessica as a sort of tribute to her. I got to Pewter City. I had a Butterfree and a Pidgey already, similar to Ash in the cartoon. I turned it off and begged my dad to buy me new batteries to keep playing, but it was safe to say I was hooked. After time, my team grew stronger. It changed, expanding itself, and now replacing Butterfree and Pidgeotto with Sandslash and Gogoro, a Dragonite traded to me from my brother. As well as 2 of them, my team also added in Charmander, Squirtle and Bulbasaur that you got during the game. However, one Pokemon never changed throughout the entire game. Jessica. She remained on my team throughout the game. I didn't mind. She was a little weaker than my other Pokemon because she wasn't evolved. She held a special place in my heart. Somehow, no matter how many times my brother tried convincing me to evolve her into a Raichu, which was impossible in my game, by training her to him to let him do it, I never did. I liked Jessica the way she was, and kept training her along with my other Pokemon, hearing the cute as she went into battle, and the little animations when I spoke to her. In fact, she was the first Pokemon on my team to reach level 100, my first ever top level Pokemon, the first Pokemon I'd ever gotten. My dad told me I was too into the game, but I saw differently. I saw Jessica as just more than pixels and bytes in a video game. I saw her as a close friend, a companion, someone who would cheer me up when I was down with her every time I pressed the A button on her. In a sense, I began to love Jessica like a friend, as weird as it sounded. Soon, Pokemon Gold and Pokemon Silver came out. I traded my yellow team to my Pokemon Silver version, and trained on that one instead, even getting them all to 100. Jessica still remained at the head of my party, along with my yellow team and my new Pokemon Silver team. I remember watching the anime in Johto, and Ash saying that he valued all of his Pokemon and treated them like family. I valued my Pokemon in the same way, and Jessica felt like the little sister I never had. My brother had a tendency to just restart his game whenever he got bored. I even got Pokemon Red to try and match him, and we even had races together. He and I battled occasionally, and he often won, but he could never match up to my Pokemon Yellow team. One day, however, one of our younger friends came around and messed with my game without me knowing. He didn't erase it, but he accidentally enrolled Jessica into a Raichu. Since it was on my new Crystal version, she couldn't refuse like she did in Yellow. I felt gutted and a little sad that some of my past had just died. To relive some nostalgic moments, I traded my team back to Yellow and began to fight some Pokemon with my new team, my love for it being back. Although Jessica wasn't following me around anymore, I still treated her like the Pikachu I'd always had. I even spoke to my game a few times, and once or twice, I thought it responded to me. If I felt happy, the Raichu's cry was normal and tough. And if I felt sad, it felt slowed down and even a little saddened. It might just have been me, but oh well. When Pokemon Ruby and Pokemon Sapphire came out, I was distraught that I couldn't trade Gen 1 and Gen 2 Pokemon to them. I felt incredibly sad and finally put my Pokemon Yellow down to pick up a copy of Ruby. So what if it was American on a British Game Boy Advance? I began to play and was instantly hooked. I made a new team, but every now and then I went back to play some of my old games. Jessica still made me come back to Yellow, and her Pikachu on the front page of the sprite always made me happy to see her again. Unfortunately, my life outside of video games was becoming less fortunate. My mother was getting sick and slowly dying of cancer. The doctors tried everything they could and fought to keep her alive, but everyone knew her end was coming, except me. I was so naive that I never understood half of what was going on. Sure, I knew my mum was ill, but then again, the inevitable happened. And it finally smacked me in the face. I closed myself off from reality, playing games and forcing everyone away from me. My thoughts were so misguided and far-fetched. My mind was being distorted and I was doing incredibly badly on my games, even if I was trying to use them as a failsafe. Ruby was no fun anymore, and most of my other games were just plain rubbish. Super Smash Bros. Melee kept me entertained for a while, but soon even that got dull. The only thing left for me now was Yellow. Somehow, as a failsafe, Jessica in Yellow actually worked. She always seemed to cheer me up, even as a Raichu. Her tough battle cry kept me going forward. I met a girl online and began to fall in love with her. She helped me through several hard times and was also a great Pokémon fan. I got Pearl soon after that, and began to play that. Getting hints and tips from this new friend, who would be known as S to protect her identity. And making a new team, buying Pokémon Battle Revolution soon after, and battling her on it occasionally. Everything was getting back together, until one fateful event. One event that would, to me, unknowingly, set off a whole chain reaction. I came home from school incredibly angry. People at school had been bullying me and a friend had turned on me, and seriously upset me. In a blind rage, I stormed into my bedroom and began to throw things. My bag, my books, drawers, anything that wasn't secure. Eventually, I calmed down and began to tidy up, removing things from a pile I'd made of heavy objects being thrown. I heard an odd crunching and cracking sound. Digging everything away, I found something that made my anger dissipate into nothing. There, crushed at the bottom of the pile, was a yellow cartridge for Game Boy Color. I only had one yellow color game, and it was the game I started with, Pokémon Yellow. I cried. I think I really cried for quite some time, just holding the smashed bits of my game to my chest. No more nostalgic battles with the Elite Four, no more fun battles with my rival. But even worse, no more Jessica. The Pikachu to Raichu I'd grown to love as a friend and almost a sister. I felt bad, and I felt guilty, but even still, I had the other Pokemon games. I had a Pearl with an amazing team, and I was soon going to get Platinum. Would I really miss a Pokemon game that was about 7 or 8 years old? I wish I'd paid more attention. I was far too blind and naive. I began to play Pearl more frequently, challenging S to battles as well as my friends. I moved to a new school and got Platinum, but my depression kept coming back to haunt me. My brother too was suffering from depression from the death of our mother, and neither of us were getting any better. Well, I was stable thanks to S, who had now become my girlfriend. But my brother was far worse off. He wasn't even going to school anymore. He'd lost interest in Pokemon and gone off to other fandoms. But I stayed loyal. I still am. To this day, the #1 Pokemon fan in my school. However, when I play Pokemon games, something lingered at the back of my mind. Something that I'd forgotten. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Whatever it was, I seemed to get this feeling every time I saw a member of the Chew family, in the anime or in the games. It was odd, and a little bit creepy. A year and a half later, approximately 6 months ago from today, another tragedy struck. My brother, who had slowly been sinking lower and lower into depression, died in his flat suddenly. Nobody told me anything about what happened, but it was enough. My depression came back like a storm and smacked me. A few days later, I was due to go back to school, and I was rummaging through some old things that would bring back memories of my brother. Digging in a box, I found a cracked object. Pulling it out, I was surprised to see it was one of my old Pokémon games. My Pokémon Yellow cartridge, to be specific. There was a large chunk of it missing from the front, and a lot of the nuts and bolts inside were loose and all tipped over to the bottom of the box. I picked them all up and attempted to find the lost piece of the cover, but to no avail. Finally, giving up, I placed it back in the box and put it away. And as I did, a name flashed in my mind that made me pause. Jessica. Where had I heard that name before? I couldn't remember. I stuffed it back under my computer desk and left for school. Things weren't going very well. After my brother's death, my mind was going wrong. I was soon hearing voices in my head and was diagnosed with minor multiple personality disorder. Pokémon Heart Gold, my most recent game, along with S and two of my friends, known to you as P and R, were the only things keeping me sane. Soon enough, P suggested that I get into the new Pokémon games, Black and White. I decided to get Black because I liked the look of the white dragon, Reshiram. He said that he would get White and we would race to see who could beat the game first, just like me and my brother would have done. Soon, the game came out, and we went instantly to playing it. Within 3 days I was already with 7 badges and a full team. My love of Pokémon would never die, and P was left in the dust with only 4 badges. Finally, beating the game and getting the transfer machine, I borrowed P's DS and began to scroll through my Pokémon to trade from Heart Gold. I wanted to replace Lightning, my Zebra Strike, and Wildfire, my Simisear, because they were far too weak. Looking through, I came across a Pikachu I'd gotten from the Yellow Forest Pokewalker run. It was female, had a modest nature, knew Surf and Volt Tackle, and 2 other moves I couldn't remember. Perfect. As a tradition of mine, I always name my Pokémon. This helps me put characteristics to them, and I've done so ever since I could remember. My Heart Gold file was loaded, and I took the Pikachu to the name rater. Pikachu seemed like the only one really worthy of being on my team. I already decided to replace Simisear with another Unova Pokémon. As I went to nickname her, I had a discussion with the other voices in my head as to what to call her. As we were talking, my stylus tapped absent-mindedly on the screen without me realising. As I came back to focus on the conversation with my other 2 counterparts, I realised that my dawdling had made me press enter. I rolled my eyes to look at what a silly name I'd probably made. Congratulations! From now on, this Pokémon will be known as Jessica. Jessica. My eyes widened as I recognised the name from somewhere. Where, I didn't remember, but it seemed to fit. Everything from there went smoothly. We decided to stick with that name and sent Jessica to my Black, and played with that weird capture game thing. It took me 2 tries to do it, but I finally got my Pokémon to Black. Jessica was shifted up to the front of my party and I began to train her. Things were going as planned. The lucky egg and experience point up power I was using for my Sea Gear were working great, and I changed her moveset a bit to be more special oriented, since she had a modest nature, and kept on training. Things started getting strange after about 30 minutes after she was in the game. I started training Jessica without an experience boost, and I'd just gotten her to level 50. Level 50 was the level I was planning to evolve her into a Raichu. I pressed A twice to get rid of the stats, and then a 3rd time to get rid of the winning battle message. However, rather than the screen going back to normal, it stayed black for a few seconds. Thinking my game had crashed, I pressed A once or twice. A black message box appeared on the screen, as if I just received an item. But the text was going slowly, and what it displayed made me frown. Really? I blinked. I didn't know what that was. The text box vanished and the screen returned to normal. I guess it was just some odd glitch for an event. Maybe a joke they did since Pikachu was a main Pokemon in the first games. Chuckling at a possible gag, I went to my pack and took out a Thunderstone, going to click on Jessica. However, rather than the page being replaced by Jessica evolving, a text box appeared. This time, the text moving at normal speed. Jessica is refusing to take the stone. Refusing? I was confused. A Pokemon had never done that to me. Except once. Maybe it was this gag again, referring to the old Pokemon game. Sighing, I closed the bag and began to walk around, or training again. Jessica raised a few more levels until she was level 60, and I tried again with the Thunderstone. But she refused. But this time, as I closed the bag, another message appeared. Black text box, slow white writing like before. It's not going to work. Now do you remember me? This was starting to creep me out a little bit. I saved my game and then checked Jessica's stats. On the status screen, her stats seemed normal. Level 60, modest nature, holding a lucky egg. Female. But something was different. It took me a few seconds to notice what it was. The Pokemon sprite usually moves on the status screens, but Jessica's was unmoving. The Pikachu was sat there, staring intently at the screen, and she didn't look happy, like all the other Pikachu did. In fact, she looked angry. Her head was crouched a little, and her eyes were narrowed, her cheeks sparking occasionally. She hadn't been like when I first gotten her. Worried that it could be Pokerus or some other form of equivalent, I took her to a Pokemon Center to see the little message saying, "You have Pokerus," come up. When I spoke to Nurse Joy, she healed my Pokemon and then began to say something else, but it wasn't what I was expecting. Oh my, it seems your Jessica isn't very pleased with you. Did you do something to upset it? You should take better care of your Pokemon. I read the screen over and over, trying to understand what I'd done wrong. Was all of this some side effect of a glitch involving Pikachus and Thunderstones? Alarm bells were going off in my head, and the two other voices were screaming at me to be careful. But I wanted to get Jessica up to a higher level to battle the champion and my friend, and so I began to train again. Once she reached level 65, I checked back on her sprite, and it had gone back to normal. But something was again different. Whereas the Pikachu sprite normally bounced, Jessica did not, and she seemed to be looking at me, her eyes locked onto mine. The detailed brown eyes, filled with emotion I never knew I could see in a game. Hatred, anger, resentment, sorrow. They were not happy eyes. And as I closed her status screen, another message flashed up. You're a liar. A cruel, heartless killer. Killer? I stared at my screen, and now I knew something was wrong. I quickly grabbed my DS and hurried upstairs to my room to find P and R, both of them in the upstairs lounge. I showed them the game, but as soon as I turned the DS to them, the message would replace itself with Jessica's stat screen. I told them to listen to me and begged them to understand, but the two of them were talking about something else, and I thought I was just going nuts and being stupid. As soon as I opened my DS back up, words were on the bottom screen. A slightly larger than normal text box. These words were worrying. The words themselves were blood red, and in a different style of writing, much more blocky and sharp than the rounded edges of the newer writing. You kept me close. We were the best of friends, and then you broke me, killed me, and then discarded me. I will never die. I am too close to your heart. Jessica's sprite appeared on the screen, but it was different again. Instead of a happy, bouncy Pikachu, her arms were folded, and her ears were drooping downwards. Her eyes narrowed, and her body had turned so it was now facing the screen directly. It was then that I really understood. She wasn't talking to the character at all. She was talking to me. Jessica? I whispered, staring at her quietly. The Pikachu sprite nodded angrily, and its mouth began to move silently as the words appeared on screen in that same blood-red digital writing. I thought you cared. I thought you really cared. Wasn't I special to you, Karen? Wasn't I your best friend? A yes-no selection box appeared. I lingered, memories slowly beginning to hit my head as the other two voices in my head remained silent, probably just as shocked as I was. Fingers trembling, I selected yes. Jessica nodded on screen before her tail flicked and her mouth began to move again. Yes, we were partners, you and I. We took our Team Rocket together. We conquered Kanto and Johto, and even Red together. I thought you cared, but I was wrong. You let rage get the better of you and snapped me like a twig. You crushed me, as well as my heart. You killed me. You're a murderer, Cameron. No! I cried, not realising that I was talking aloud. Jessica, I'm sorry, I really am. I could feel the tears begin to stream down my face. You've got it all wrong! There was silence from the screen before I suddenly heard Pika from the speakers. I looked at the screen to see that she had turned her back on me and had begun to walk away. I shook my head, frantically pressing the A button trying to do something, but all I got was a swish of her lightning bolt tail as she faded out. The screen returned to normal, and Black, the character, was facing Pikachu sprite at the top of some steps. I guessed that this was Jessica, and the little Pikachu block looked at Black before another text box appeared. At the top of Celestial Tower, I will wait for you. With that, the screen flashed back, and then back to normal. Things were wrong though. The music had stopped playing, and Black seemed to be moving slightly slower than normal. When I checked my party Pokemon, the first thing I noticed that Jessica was no longer in my party. The first base was replaced by my starter, Wish, my Samurott. Looking over my Pokemon, I noticed some other things. Their cries were not sounded, and their sprites were frozen. The sprites themselves were also only done in certain monochrome colours, yellow, red, blue, and whatnot, as well as in large blocky pixels, just like Pokemon Yellow sprites. Everything suddenly hit me. Jessica, my old team, the nostalgia, and finally what happened to the cartridge. Without another word, in real life or in game, I used my trusty Siliglyph, Hypnode, to fly to Mistralon City and headed north towards Celestial Tower. The music was still refusing to play, but I was in too much torment with myself to care. The two voices in my head were trying to reassure me that this was some kind of nightmare, but I knew it was all happening. It was so real, and my throat was so dry. My tears ran down my face as I entered the tower of deceased Pokemon. As soon as I entered, the atmosphere was different from outside. The room was darker than normal, and there wasn't anybody there. There was a forlorn silence, but faintly, music was playing. I began to ascend the spiral staircase, and the music got much louder with every floor I raised. Each floor was how it should be, but much darker, with no trainers or wild Pokemon. The greys were painted in black, and on the final staircase I saw Cameron used rage, Jessica died, in block red capital letters spiralling up the stairs, one letter on each step. I finally reached the top, and surprisingly, found everyone there. All of the trainers from the tower, the gym leaders, the Elite Four, Belle, Sharen, N, Alda. They were all here, looking towards the main steps, to the bell at the top of the tower. As I approached them, people stopped me. What they said shocked me and made my throat drier and even more fresh tears well up in my eyes. Belle said, "Cameron, how could you do such a thing?" Sharon said, I looked up to you. How could you betray me?" Older said, "This is unforgivable. But maybe she will." N said, "You said that you wanted people and Pokémon to live in peace. Then why did you..." As I rose the final few steps, Belle, Sharon, N and Older all followed, blocking the way back out. I went forward and stopped. There, standing in front of the bell, was undeniably a Raichu sprite. The Raichu rang the bell, the sound sounding with the eerie music, which I now recognised as the 8-bit Lavender Town music from Pokémon Yellow. The music suddenly stopped and another text bubble appeared, black with white writing. "You came, Cameron." "I did," I whispered quietly to the screen, sniffing as I stared at it. The Raichu sprite turned around and took a few steps towards Black, stopping only 1 or 2 spaces away. "Do you know why I wanted to call you here?" A yes/no box appeared again. I pressed yes, with shaking thumbs as the Raichu shook its head in response. "No, don't lie. I called you here so you can see what you did to me." The sprite took a final few steps towards Black, and the screen fuzzed out. A larger sprite appeared, replacing most of the screen, like N did sometimes when he talked. What I saw, however, made me sick. It was Raichu, but no Raichu that I'd ever seen. The creature's ears were flattened to its skull, a huge gash leading from one ear to the other across the forehead. Blood-stained fur was shown all the way down its face, past its sorrowful eyes and its scratched cheeks. Its arms hung limply by its sides and its tail drooped over its shoulder, the lightning bolt at the tip of it having some large chunk ripped out of it. The Raichu's mouth had blood dried around the lips, and some still dribbling from the corner of his mouth. But it was the main part of the Raichu that terrified me. Right where the chest was, the abdomen and stomach area of the Raichu too, there was a gaping wound. Inside could be seen the intestines, bones, cracked ribs, and copious amounts of blood dripping from it, covering the white belly fur and staining it red. I could see its heart, and with a sickening turn of my stomach, I saw it feebly beating within the shattered ribcage. Panicking, I pressed the A button repeatedly to get the image away from the screen. Instead, a text box appeared, the writing digital and red, just like blood coming from the Raichu. "What's wrong, Cameron? Can't stop what you did to me, your closest friend, the one you so mercilessly killed." "I'm sorry!" I screamed, staring at Raichu's face. "I'm sorry!" With that, I crumpled over my screen and sobbed. "Jessica, it was an accident. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't mean to do anything to you. You're still my Pokémon. You're still my friend. None of this was meant to happen, Jess. Don't hate me. It was a stupid accident." I cried for a solid few minutes before finally looking at the screen. Jessica had gone, and the overworld Raichu sprite was simply standing there, looking at Black. Nothing was said for a moment, and I simply stared at the screen. Finally, a text box appeared. "Was it truly an accident?" A yes/no box appeared, and I pressed yes, and there was another pause. The Raichu sprite turned around and walked back to the bell, before another text box appeared. "Do you regret what you did?" Another yes/no box. I frantically pressed yes, more tears making their way down my face. There was another pause before Jessica finally turned around, staring at Black. Jessica believes you. I felt a wave of relief over me as I saw the Raichu sprite walk over to Black. The screen flashed up with the gruesome Raichu sprite again, but this time the sorrowful eyes were replaced with the soft ones, a small weak smile on its face. Do you still love me? There was no yes/no box, but instead it asked if I wanted to record or check mic options. I knew my DS microphone was just fine, so I pressed record and took a deep breath. Jessica, I'm so sorry for what I did. I wish I could reverse what I put you through. I should never have forgotten. You're not just a bunch of pixels and data, but a being, just like me. I'm really sorry. I promise. I'll never do it again. Ever. I'll be more careful. I'll never restart a Pokemon game, ever. All I want, I took a soft breath and finally let the last words out, is your forgiveness for my stupidity. I do still love you, Jessica. The picture of Jessica on the screen nodded, and it faded out. The overworld returned, and Jessica appeared as a Raichu sprite again. This time, however, Black spun around in a circle, and a small Pokeball flew from his hand. A flash of white light engulfed Jessica, and the ball closed. As Black moved forward to pick it up, a new text box appeared. Thank you, Karen. You really do relate. I smiled at the screen, and as I did, Sharon, Belle, N, and Alder all walked up to Black and surrounded him. The screen faded out, and Black reappeared in front of the bell. He rang the bell, and the usual message appeared. Instead of what normally happens, however, Black walked away from the bell with the screen still focused on it. As it faded, I saw a few ghost silhouettes. A Charizard, a Blastoise, a Venusaur, a Sandslash, and a Dragonite. All of my old Pokemon Yellow team had been laid to rest in the Celestial Tower, never returning, but never being forgotten. The screen blacked out and returned me to Mistralon City. A message popped up saying that the game had been saved. I checked my Pokemon and saw Jessica in my 6th slot. Opening her page, a huge wave of nostalgia and comfort greeted me and my 2 other voices as we looked at the screen. Greeting us was a level 100 Raichu, modest nature, female, and with the nickname Jessica, and OT as Cam, which was my Pokemon Yellow's character name. Moving to the move selection, I saw that her stats were exactly how they were left in Yellow, and her moveset was exactly the same as her old Yellow moveset. Thunderbolt, Double Team, Submission, and Surf. I smiled broadly. She had forgiven me and decided to join me once again. As I pressed B to leave the page, one final message popped up. The large Raichu picture appeared again, but this time there were no cuts or internal organs shown. What was shown was the smiling face of a healthy Raichu beaming at the screen. A message box popped up as the Raichu's mouth moved as if it was saying the words. Thank you, Cameron, for taking me back. Oh, and by the way... The screen changed briefly. The picture now had one paw up, and I saw something in her paw that made my eyes widen and show that no matter how much anyone would prove otherwise, this was no joke or hack. In her paw sat the final, missing part to my Pokemon Yellow cartridge. I never truly forgot you either. I hope you hear this and realise, to us, it may seem a game, but Jessica taught me that if you love a game too much, it becomes part of you, so much so that you can't leave it behind. I have never broken or restarted a Pokemon game since. I am extremely careful with all my games. I don't want to upset anybody like Jessica ever again. I'm just glad she was so forgiving and loving. If she wasn't, could have ended so much worse.